Hello, everyone. We're ready to begin. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, from the Westin Harbour Castle Hotel in downtown Toronto. Welcome to the Empire Club. Today we present Barry Perry, President and Chief Executive Officer of Fortis. Fortis is an interesting success story. With fiscal revenues of $8.4 billion last year, Fortis's history can be traced all the way back to 1885, where it was once called the St. John's Electric Light Company in what is now Newfoundland and Labrador. Growing rapidly to become a leader in North America in the utility industry, Fortis has played a vital role in shaping the evolving energy sector in North America, including at the local, provincial, national, and international level. Conversations regarding the energy sector at the Empire Club have regularly examined issues here in the province of Ontario and national themes. I think it is a wonderful opportunity and a much-needed perspective to hear from a utility leader with roots in our furthest eastern province. Barry's career with Fortis has spanned nearly 20 years, with the Newfoundland and Labrador native joining in 2000 as Vice President of Finance and Chief Financial Officer of Newfoundland Power. Last year, Mr. Perry was named Atlantic Business Magazine's Atlantic Canada CEO of the Year. Under his leadership, Fortis has become one of the top 15 utilities in North America, with customers in Canada, the U.S., and the Caribbean. Leveraging his unique experience and leadership to provide us insight on the utility sector as it embraces change, without further ado, Barry Perry.
Thank you, Mike. I'm happy to be here today. Get my glasses. So I'm just going to give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. First of all, I want to talk about the Fortis story. And then I'm going to talk about the current situation in our sector, and that's the electricity sector mainly, and the future of our sector. So let me just start and say it's all about clean energy now. That's what it's all about. And where are we today with regards to clean energy? Canada basically leads the world. 80% of our electricity comes from emission-free sources: hydroelectric, wind, solar, nuclear. An amazing place that we are right now. The U.S. is at about 1/3 of its electricity from emission-free sources, and that's a dramatic improvement over the last decade or so. And Europe's at 60%, largely related to its renewables and nuclear fleet. So Canada, again, is in a very strong place. And so much progress is being made that our emissions now from the sector, the electricity sector, is actually less than from the transportation sector. So transportation emits more than electricity, and that's where the focus needs to move to start cleaning up that sector. So let's step back, the Fortis story. So we currently have 10 businesses across North America. We have about $52 billion in assets currently. 20 years ago when I started, our balance sheet was about $1 billion. So we went from $1 billion to $50 billion in 20 years. What a success story, expanding across Canada, and in the last 5 or 6 years, expanding into the U.S. We are now larger in America than we are in Canada. 2/3 of our net income comes from the U.S. So we've been successful in our efforts to grow the business in North America. We do have a very unique business model. Sitting back in St. John's, we have about 60 people in our head office. That's about double where we were 3 or 4 years ago. We have about 9,000 employees across the group at this point. So we run a very decentralized business. And every one of our utilities has its own management team, its own board of directors. And that works really well, largely because regulation is local. Provincial regulatory bodies, state regulatory bodies, and those regulators want to know that the people, the resources required to run their utilities are resident within their service territories. And that's the Fortis model, and that's been, I think, the hallmark of our success. It does require a lot of trust in the structure of the organization. We rely on our teams. I rarely instruct anyone to do anything, unless usually it's something that's screwed up, if that happens. And I haven't had too many of those circumstances given the success of the business. So it works really well. So we've grown through acquisitions. We have I think, a good style about our approach and engaging with these local teams. I think generally we are seen as the party that folks would like to get involved with. We don't always win every process that we get involved in, but I think if there's a tie, typically we get the nod. Since our last acquisition, which was the transmission company that's based in Michigan, ITC, which is the largest transmission company in the U.S., it owns 16,000 miles of transmission, enough to go across Canada 5 times. You just put it in sort of that perspective. It's pretty big. We've been focused on growing the existing business that we have. So we haven't been on the acquisition trail. We're currently spending about $4 billion a year in capital in our energy systems, and about $20 billion over a 5-year period. So we're growing our base business now by about 7% a year. Just a little bit on performance, because this doesn't work unless you perform well when you're an investor-owned business. And Fortis has been a top performer over this period of time, this incredible period that we've grown so well over 20 years. We've delivered about 14% annual TSR for all those 20 years. So imagine, market cap went from $500 million to almost $25 billion over that period of time. An amazing success story. We do have a great record on our dividends as well. We have increased them now for 46 consecutive years, and we've announced the next 5 years we'll raise that dividend on average about 6% a year. So that's the Fortis story. So I got to get that out of the way. So the current situation in our sector, I would tell you that I'm up here to be very positive today. The electricity sector in North America has something to be really proud of. Most of our businesses, and I'm saying this generally, not just for Fortis, are transitioning to cleaner energy, reducing their carbon footprints. They're also modernizing their grids. The energy grid is probably the most important piece of infrastructure in all of our lives. And I can tell you the sector, both the gas and electricity sector in North America, are doing their jobs in maintaining that grid, enhancing it, and getting ready for all the new things that it's going to be required to do in the future. And we're also building smarter energy infrastructure. With the advent of new technologies, the grid has to get more sophisticated, and that's going to require more investment. Managing people's homes, the amount of sensors that we're putting out in the grid is just going up exponentially, and that's going to continue. So again, amazing progress has been made, and I would say the attitude in the sector has changed. We are much more on our front feet now when we engage with our customers about delivering clean energy. We get it. And we're doing it, frankly, in a way, and I'm generalizing at 50,000 feet here, we're doing it in a way where customer rates generally are not changing a whole lot. There are pockets where we've messed this up, obviously, in North America. My home province is one of those. Building a big hydro, too big for the province, clean energy, but expensive. So we're going to be dealing with that for a long time. But ultimately, it will be clean energy, so that will be positive. But generally, across North America, cleaner energy at reasonable prices is where we're at, and I think that's something to be really proud of. So that's the current situation. I want to talk a little bit about another big theme, is the theme around ESG, environment, social governance. It's becoming mainstream. You know, if you're a big public company, you're not dealing with these matters, you're not going to get new shareholders. You're not going to keep your existing shareholders, because it's becoming a focus of the institutional shareholder, is making sure that where they invest, that those folks are focusing on these matters and improving year after year. At Fortis, I believe we lead on the social and governance aspects of ESG, and increasingly we're leading on the environment. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but safety and reliability. Utilities, when you think utilities, these two key areas, the metrics of safety and reliability, are the most important things. Despite all the other noise you hear, you know, making sure our employees are safe, our customers are safe, making sure we deliver reliable energy, those are the most important metrics. And you know, any utility that does not talk about those, you shouldn't be looking at investing in them, that's for sure. At Fortis, we are better than the industry averages in these areas. So we have good performance, and it's a priority for the company. It goes all the way up to how we set our objectives for bonuses and all that kind of stuff, and it will continue to be a major focus. Another emerging area is diversity and inclusion. It's a passion of mine. Society, we have to encourage more gender diversity. We have to make progress in this area, and we are taking steps at Fortis to be a leader in this area. Currently, 60% of our head office is female, 60%. 42% of our board is female. I'm hoping to get to parity there soon. And 33% of our executive are female. But we all know it's more than just gender diversity, it's inclusivity, and we're working on that now, but I don't want to lose sight of we got to make a lot of progress on gender diversity. And especially as you go down in the organization into the trades in our sector, you know, it's more male dominated in terms of power line technicians and all that. We need to make progress there, and that's a focus. So the environment. So the focus on delivering cleaner energy. You know, when you think about Fortis, our business is really the delivery of energy. We do have some generation, but mainly it's the poles and wires and gas lines that deliver the electrons and natural gas to customers. That's our focus. So we're fortunate in a way that that's a good footprint, because we're not heavy emitters of greenhouse gases. But that doesn't let us off the hook. We should be doing our best to get cleaner every year. We are increasing our investment in wind and solar, especially in Arizona. We own Tucson Electric Power. It's a vertically integrated utility. It does have generation. It does have some coal generation, but it's quickly migrating away from coal and going to wind, solar, and natural gas. And ultimately, I think that's where America will end up on the path that it's on. Right now, we just announced building a new wind generating plant it's actually in New Mexico, but we'll be supplying Tucson Electric Power. It's a 250 megawatt plant, Oso Grande. It's beautiful, like 3-cent power into Tucson. So, and it's got about a 50% capacity factor. So it's better than most hydros in Canada. So right now, we had a target of getting to 30% of our retail sales in Arizona from renewables by 2030. With this Oso Grande wind investment, we're going to be there in 2021, like 9 years ahead of schedule. And back to what I was saying about the industry is really taking an aggressive view on this. This is what's happening. People are running ahead of their targets, and I think you're going to see that continue. So now what we've said is that how do we, if we're already there 9 years ahead of schedule, what's the new target? If we're at 30%, what's the new target? And so we're working with local stakeholders in that region, in the southern part of Arizona, the University of Arizona, to develop new targets for the business there. They may be more renewables. They may be greenhouse gas reduction targets. I'm not quite sure yet where it's going to end up, but they will be new more aggressive targets for the business to get cleaner over the next decade or so. I want to spend a little bit of time on ITC. It was our last acquisition. It was a $16 billion deal, cross-border investment. We used shares and cash, very complicated deal. It's gone so well. Been 3 years now since we acquired that business. And when you think about clean energy, ITC is in the heart of it all. They're hooking up the wind in the U.S. Midwest. And the U.S. Midwest is Wind Alley, basically. Right now, in the regions that ITC operates in, there's 170,000 megawatts, 170,000 megawatts of wind and solar in the queue to be hooked up. Now, it won't all get done, but a lot of it's going to get done. And just put that in perspective, the Ontario grid is 26,000 megawatts, the entire grid. So this is 170,000 megawatts. Batteries, battery storage, there's 10,000 megawatts of battery storage in that region in the queue to be hooked up. And batteries are becoming a big part of what we'll be doing in the future in terms of storage of electricity from renewables. So ITC, for us, as much as we're not a big investor in generation, it was a big tool for us to be part of this move to cleaner energy, because a lot of what it does is hooking up all that wind to the grid and getting that energy into the load centers. I want to switch a little bit here and talk about natural gas. I don't know if you all in this room understand it, but Canada is the 5th largest producer of natural gas in the world. America is number one. They're sitting just south of us. They're number one in the world, and they're using their natural gas big time to clean up their energy, their electricity system, to get off coal and to migrate to renewables. Natural gas is a big part of that solution. It's cheap. It's really cheap. It's clean, and it's abundant in Canada. We have to use it, and that would be my message to the group today. We have to use it. Fortis BC is our utility in British Columbia. It's a natural gas distribution business. We serve 1 million customers in British Columbia. It's a big part of the energy. It's actually the largest supplier of energy in that province. I think to actually replace it would require 6, 8, 10,000 megawatts of generating capacity, to actually replace the energy that's delivered through natural gas. So it's really not possible to do. It's cheap. It's probably the only thing cheap in British Columbia at this point in time. And our BC business, I'm so proud of that business. It's probably the most innovative natural gas franchise in North America. It's already doing things like converting heavy-duty trucking from diesel and gasoline to natural gas and reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 20 and 30%. And by the way, delivering amazing savings to those operators, upwards of 50% savings in their costs by doing that conversion. The BC ferry system is being converted to natural gas. So those ferries that were burning marine diesel, now they're burning natural gas. We actually, first time in the world, we drive trucks loaded with natural gas onto the ferries, load the ferries, and they go. The first time it was done by truck was in British Columbia. Our utility there is doing that. Renewable gas. We have about 10,000 customers now who pay a little bit extra to get their gas, to be able to say it's renewable. So we get that gas from landfills and from agricultural waste. So we create the gas, we produce the gas, put it into our system, and offer it as a product to our customers. And that's increasing in demand from customers. And we're also now exporting LNG to China. A lot of us hear about the big projects in northern BC that are massive. They're billions and billions of dollars. But Fortis is already exporting LNG to China through what's called ISO containers. These are truck-sized containers. We put them on container ships. We zip them over to China, and they get plugged into factories and whatever. It's hopefully something that will increase over time, but we're starting to do that. And we're setting new, more aggressive targets on renewable gas, on greenhouse gas emissions in British Columbia as well. Right now, we're looking at our gas system there and saying that by 2030, 15% of the gas that we will be distributing to customers will come from renewable gas. We're only at like 2 or 3% right now, so we have a long ways to go, but we're setting an aggressive target. And we're looking at reducing greenhouse gases by about 30% between now and 2030 in our system there. So aggressive targets, again, the right thing to do, and it's what our customers want. I want to move on to electrification in terms of what's happening in the sector. The transportation sector is the next big target to cut greenhouse gas emissions. There's more there than now in electricity, and that's where our focus has got to go. Some will say that about 50% of passenger cars will be electric by 2030. I'm probably not on that, I don't think that's aggressive. I don't think we'll be that level, but it's going to be a lot. And then others are saying by 2050, 100% of the fleet, passenger car fleet, will be electric. Detroit, we know, and based on our experience with ITC, we're in Michigan a lot these days, and we get a lot of input there. It looks like it's retooling to go all electric. And GM, they're putting a lot of money behind going all electric. Charging networks are probably behind. We're not far enough ahead. I think that's an area where the utilities can play a big role. It's probably, when I think about what's coming, we are probably the only sector, the only group that can make it happen in the time frame that's required, because we're good at deploying capital, infrastructure, because this needs to be a major push in the next 5 years to deploy massive charging across North America. The grid will have to be enhanced as well as load's going to be impacted by more electric. Load's going up, and people want to charge at home, and it's going to require distribution networks, transmission networks to be upgraded. So I think that's going to be a positive. Good for Fortis. That's our business, is the grid. So that's very positive. So overall, I'm a big believer in electrification. I think it is coming. I heard a stat. I was just at the International Electricity Summit in Japan, and one of the research, I call scientists there, said within 5 years, one charge of a passenger car will be equivalent to a tank of gas. So you think about it. If that's truly the case, 5 years from now, one charge is the same as going filling up a tank of gas. You'll be able to get 600-700 kilometers from that. We're not there yet, but if that's truly the case, that's the game changer right there, and all these issues around range anxiety and all these things will dissipate, and people will go to electric vehicles. Coming back, I want to talk a little bit about Ontario. We do have a couple of really interesting projects that we're working on in Ontario, and they're sort of related to all this move to clean energy, social matters, and the role of utilities in our lives and all that. So the first is Lake Erie Connector Project. This is a 117-kilometer, 1,000-megawatt underwater transmission line that would run between Nanticoke, Ontario, underneath Lake Erie, over into Erie, Pennsylvania. And very exciting project that we're working on. What's interesting about it is it would be the first direct link between Ontario grid, this 26,000-megawatt grid that we have in Ontario, and the PJM wholesale market. And that's, I think, the largest market for electricity in the world. It has 180,000 megawatts of generation, really large market. So you think about it, connecting Ontario directly to that market for the first time, that's got to be a good idea, right? And for Ontario to get there now, it's got to go through like several other jurisdictions, and everyone takes a piece of the pie as you travel through their jurisdiction. This would be a direct link. And by the way, it's approved, it's permitted on both sides of the border. We have a presidential permit, we have the National Energy Board approval. And so I think, when you think about it, it's going to be a great outlet for excess energy that Ontario creates from time to time. There's lots of times when Ontario has too much energy and it needs to export that energy. A lot of times it's not getting much value for that. And our belief is this project will create about $100 million of value annually for Ontario customers. So we're working hard on it. We're engaged with the provincial government on it. I think common sense will prevail and this project will go ahead. And we're very excited about that. The next project is the Watay-Nikidiap project. That's a long word. Some of you may have heard about it. It means line that brings light. And what it is a 1,800-kilometer transmission line that will connect up 17 remote First Nation communities in northwestern Ontario to the Ontario grid for the first time. So these communities, they currently run on small diesel systems that are not that friendly from an environmental perspective, that are maxed out at capacity, and some of these communities can't even build a new house because there's no electric capacity available. It's expensive and unreliable, frankly. So they will finally be connected, like I would think everyone in this room is, to the grid. And what's interesting about the project, it's unprecedented in how it's structured. It's being led by First Nations. 51% of the project is owned by First Nations, 24 First Nations. And we've been learning together as we brought this project together about how to partner, and it's gone really, really well. It's a complex project. The province, the federal government are big supporters, and they're heavily involved in this project, and I want to thank both of those governments for the tremendous support that they provided. Fortis owns 39% of the project, and we are responsible for ensuring the project is constructed well and the operation of the project for upwards to 25 years. Then it will be transferred completely to the First Nations that are involved. So one of those great projects when you think about what we should be doing as a business in terms of improving lives and working with our First Nation partners. This is a project that we're all very proud of. We've now just recently awarded the construction contract for the project. It's one of the bigger transmission contract awards in the last number of years in North America. The company Villard, who's an expert in construction of power lines, has been awarded the contract. We are now finalizing the construction loans with our banking colleagues in Canada. We're getting close on that. I'm hopeful that in the next few days that will be done, and we'll be announcing the notice to proceed with this project here shortly. So I couldn't be up here without talking a little bit about the Canadian business environment. And listen, I know there's an election going on, so this is really going to be good stuff, right? So we have a stable economy in Canada. Job numbers are good on a national basis. Not so good back home in Newfoundland, but good nationally. So pretty reasonable place for the country at this point. But as we know, we have some issues around energy and all of that. I'm not going to wade into those. But I do want to talk about our sector, the utility sector. And by being involved in the U.S. for the last, I would say, 15 years or so in terms of our goals to expand and then finally being successful to expand and now being a big part of the industry in the U.S., you can't help yourself to compare the American model versus the Canadian model. And the investor-owned business that we're in, and increasingly we seek capital from everywhere. Basically, you're spending $4 billion a year in capital. We don't just get it from Canada, right? We get it from the U.S., we get it from Australia, we get it from Europe. We trade on NYSE, we trade on the TSX. So we're global from a capital perspective. So our shareholders are always ranking our different businesses and say, well, you have these U.S. businesses that have very attractive returns. Your Canadian business, not as much. Why is that the case? And so as CEO of the company, you got to be able to answer some of these questions. And I would say to you that in some cases, there is no good answer, because what we do in Canada in the utility business is exactly what we do in America in the utility business. We're heavily regulated in both countries. The systems are established the same way. Regulation is generally the same. There's no, U.S. regulation is not more risky, therefore that would drive higher returns possibly. It's not more risky than Canadian regulation. So this is an interesting point, and one thing I've been talking a little bit about, what's happened is Canadian businesses have been buying American businesses. Fortis was probably the front runner in some of this, but many of our colleagues have followed up and bought U.S. businesses. What's interesting is there's been no capital coming north. None. Basically zero. So American utilities, investor-owned businesses are not buying anything in Canada. I think there's got to be a reason for that. I think the reason is the return situation. Our returns are lower in Canada, and the bigger area is the amount of investment we're allowed to put to work in our business, the amount of equity. In the U.S., typically it's around 50% that you're allowed to invest in a utility as equity and earn on that. In Canada, we're down in the 30s, like the high 30s. I'll give it 40, so at least 10 points different. And that adds up to be substantial amounts of money over the course of a year, and the substantial investment that we have in Canada. So I believe, frankly, it's a thing that has to be resolved over time. It will not happen overnight. We have to talk more about it, and we will do that. But it's, having this situation, this dislocation of investment where everything's going south and nothing's coming north, it's not a good thing. We're going to continue to do our jobs in Canada. We have great businesses, obviously, that we're running. We have good customer relations, good regulatory relations, but we do have to talk more about these issues because capital is very much global at this point. And I would say, as I travel around, I'm meeting shareholders from everywhere, and these shareholders are looking at Canada, and some folks would say, Barry, what are you worried about? You can raise the capital in Canada. I'm not quite as sure as that. We need these international investors to be part of our economy. And right now, they are shunning Canada because of all the issues around that energy file, and that does trickle into the other businesses. So we do need to solve those issues. So I'm going to wrap up and talk a little bit about the future. I'm very optimistic, and I'm proud, actually, to be part of the electricity and natural gas business in North America at this point in time. Cleaner energy is going to dominate. Like, you're going to keep hearing about utilities getting cleaner and cleaner, and we're headed to being like these businesses that basically are made up of nuclear, solar, wind, hydro, and natural gas. That's my sense. If you look 30 years out, that's the combo, and the system will be incrementally better than where we are today. And Canada is already a leader. We need to keep understanding we're already a leader in these areas. We're 80% there. So, it's harder to get the next 10, the next 20%, but we still got to work on that. But we're already in a really, really strong place. I would say electrification is coming. Maybe 5 years ago I wouldn't be as strong a believer, but the cars are getting nicer. They're getting a little cheaper. Battery storage is improving. This is coming. Customers are starting to demand it, and so I believe that trajectory is not going to change. I think the grid, the electric grid especially, is the place to be. When you think about all this new technology that's coming, electric vehicles, mobile technology, all these things require a strong grid, and that's where Fortis is investing. When I was in Japan this past week, I was at this, as I said, the International Electricity Summit, and basically it was 60% of the world's utilities were represented there. And I was thinking about my daughters, who are 23 and 25, and my youngest daughter just started to work at Exxon in St. John's. They have a big presence in the offshore oil. And we've had lots of conversations about what Exxon does, and they're going to be needed for a very, very long time. But I was feeling about how proud she would be to be sitting in that room in Japan and hearing the conversations of the CEOs of the larger utilities in the world about the direction of this industry, about the commitments to get to 80% emissions-free electricity, to get to 100% in some cases. It's just an amazing conversation to be part of, and that's what's happening in this sector. So one of the models, I guess, or sayings or slogans of the U.S. industry currently is the industry is getting as clean as we can, as fast as we can, while keeping reliability and affordability front and center. And that's a pretty good slogan, I think, for what I'm feeling about the sector right now. As clean as we can, as fast as we can, while keeping reliability and affordability front and center. And if we can live by that, I think we'll be a successful business for the next couple of decades here. So thank you very much. And Mike's going to come up and chair some questions.
We're gonna have a little bit of time to ask Barry a few questions. There is a mic moving around, so if anybody wants to put their hand up, we can help that out. Maybe I'll just kick it off. Peter Drucker, the management consultant, always says if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Is there one number that you look at every day that you care about most?
Well, I always worry about cost, to what customers pay for their electricity. It's, a successful utility business can't grow well without finding ways to reduce the impact on its customers, and you can't just assume you're just going to ram it through your customer rates.
Right.
So I think you got to be very, very concerned about making sure your rates at least are at or below inflation on a go-forward basis. And, obviously, Mike, the amount of renewable energy in the business and all that, those factors, but, from a business perspective, those issues around customer rates are front and center.
Right. Does anybody have a mic? Here we are. Mr. Cobb.
Is this on? Yeah. Thanks, Barry. Just because we're in the election cycle, we've been watching a lot of the debates, and I've been taking in quite a few of them, and it seems like the tone of the debates seems to support electrification, as you said. Also, and I don't know how universal it is, but they're almost looking at fossil fuel as a fuel of yesteryear. You probably picked up some of that if you'd been watching some of the debates. However, we have this fantastic resource, and as you said, we absolutely have to use it, and it will get to Tidewater. There are other jurisdictions that are looking for this, and it's going to get there either by pipeline or by rail car or something. But how important do you think it is that Canada get behind a coast-to-coast pipeline for the resource you mentioned?
I think it has to happen. I really do. The world's going to need oil for a long time. We're consuming 100 million barrels a day, I think, currently. You're just recently starting here, the big oil companies starting to talk a little bit more positively about their businesses, I think, in terms of investing in big infrastructure now, because, if they stop investing, the reserves start getting utilized, we'll run out of the oil, prices start to spike. If you don't keep investing, and these are 30 and 40-year investments, it could cause some real problems, because we're not ready to get off oil right now. We're not ready, right? So I think, and Canada does this better probably than any other country in the world in how we produce this stuff. So I think for me, it's important that we utilize our resources. Listen, we have to be always getting cleaner, reducing greenhouse gases, but we do have to keep, I think, harvesting our resources. I more obviously are in the natural gas camp, given that that's our part of our business. But there's a long road ahead for Canadian oil too, in my view.
One more question over here.
Hey Barry, it's Annette Verschuren. First question, I love your perspective on diversity. When I was running Home Depot Canada, 40% of my leadership team were women. And we were the most profitable division in the whole company, all during my tenure. And I just really want to ask you, how much influence in the performance of your company has to do with your diversity of your team, your board, et cetera? Second question is on risk. I love that you're a risk taker. How much of an influence has that been to you? What you're doing, with the Indigenous peoples of the North, what you're doing with the natural gas in British Columbia. The fact that you are bringing in renewable natural gas is so bloody impressive. This is one of the best speeches I've heard since I've been involved in the electricity market in 2012, and I just want to thank you. So 2 questions on the equity issue and on the risk-taking issue.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your comments. I think, and let's put gender diversity aside for a second. When you think about the Fortis, what we've created is these businesses now that have their own teams, but we're working together. So there's a real geographic and regulatory diversity that we have, and cultural diversity. Folks in Arizona, different than folks in New York State, different than folks in British Columbia, have grown up with different economies, different experiences. They're all part of running Fortis at this point in time. So, and we are, I can think as Newfoundlanders, to be honest, we're open, right? We allow, we go into these situations with no predetermined conclusions, and I think that's what, frankly, has made us really successful. So I think it's been a big part of our success that, that inclusivity, I'll call it, more so than maybe the gender diversity. But I can tell you, some of the women that are working in our company, they're pretty strong people. So, they scare the shit out of me sometimes. Sorry, but there's a few here in the room now. Some of you can hear laughing, but no, it's just incredible. We have a special thing going at Fortis, and I hope that's something that we'll continue to improve upon and make better. In terms of risk, no business is successful without taking risk. And, maybe at times we've taken too much risk, but, it's worked out for us. I go back, frankly, to ITC. It was a big transaction, $16 billion deal. Cross-border, required us to list on the NYSE, and was it bet the company? I don't know, but we just saw so much value in that transmission grid that they operate, and all the big macro trends that we were seeing coming, that ITC was sort of front and center on those, and we reached to get that, and it ended up working out. But I'm always a believer in, folks getting up at the bat and taking swings. You're never going to hit the ball all the time, but you got to be aggressive in business. For me, business got to grow, right? If you don't grow in a business, my God, you don't want to work there, right? It's like it becomes pretty stale pretty quickly. So growth is important, and you don't grow without taking risk. And this is why now we have a big innovation push in the company, and that's sort of like an old word, innovation. Maybe not as old for utilities, but innovation is what drives growth. And getting all the team members focusing on all the great things that are happening in our sector and making sure they're implementing them in their businesses, that's driving growth, but it's also taking risk. So I think so important to success in business is that risk-taking, that aspect of a person's sort of attitude, I guess.
Great. I think we have time for one more at the back.
Thank you, Mr. Perry, for a most enlightening presentation. I have experiences in Australia, Europe, and America. So looking at holistically and globally, Canada is one of the richest countries in the world, the second largest continent. What do you see the future? Because what you portrayed is a Western culture, but the world now consists of 7,000 million. We're 36 million. In my graduate class, the majority were from overseas because they're very smart, very intelligent, and educated. In the future, with technology, which doubles every 6 months or exponential, as you indicated, today we do have a good life, but the convergence of cultures and convergence holistically of different values is going to impact us. And I don't think our lifestyle will be the same as it is now. Maybe you can comment on what you see the future for our children and grandchildren. We worry about global warming, but there's other factors that will be introduced, I think.
That's really a big brain question. I'm positive, right? Here's a company, here's a management team that started out in Newfoundland, one of the smallest jurisdictions in the damn world, and we've created a world-class business, a leader in North America, and are competing, like anyone else, frankly. So I would say if you were starting the company today and you were saying, okay, what are our opportunity set, we'd be feeling a lot more confident about our abilities than we were 20 years ago. So I'm more positive, and I see my own kids, they're well-educated. I have a daughter who's living in Australia, and my other daughter's in Newfoundland working with Exxon, and they're just bright kids. And I know my work colleagues, their families, the same thing. So I'm so optimistic about younger folks, and it just seems like they're there earlier than us. They're where they're in their 20s. Some of us didn't get to where they're thinking until we're in our 40s. It's just so I'm very very positive about the future. I do think in Canada, we got to figure it out. We can't give up on everything that got us to this point in terms of the resources in our country. We got to find that right balance, and it's an amazing country. I'm so proud of being Canadian, and I do believe we have a very bright future. We do have to work through this sort of balance issue, I think, from using our resources, but obviously making the country cleaner as we go forward. And I think we can get there. We just got to get some good leadership and make it happen. Thank you.
I'm now going to invite Richard Fridman from Blake's to give proper appreciation.
And thanks, Barry. You mentioned Fortis has something really special. Well, we appreciate you sharing some of that special Fortis vibe with us here today, and for providing some very interesting insights into what will no doubt be shaping the utilities and distribution sector in the coming years. As this sector undergoes fundamental change with the renewable energy slowly phasing out fossil fuels, the increased focus on grid resiliency, and the always somewhat unknown regulatory future, Fortis looks to be well-positioned to respond to these changes and to deliver sustainable, reliable energy for years to come. So again, Barry, thanks very much for your words, for your insights, and best of luck for the 2 decades ahead.
Wonderful. So in closing, I'd just like to let folks know that you could always look at the empireclub.com to learn about more events. We launched one today. The Business and Trade panel will take place on November 5th at the Shangri-La Hotel. It will feature Goldie Hyder, John Charest, Peter MacKay, and Nicole Vernkint. We have the Alberta Finance Minister on November 12th, and Mark Poeska from Hydro One will be here with us on November 20th as well. Thanks, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.